Guten gardening, everybody. You know what a false spring is? I'm sure you've experienced this where the plants start to develop. They get tricked into believing it's springtime because the temperatures warm up outside and you get a little bit of greenery growing out. And then all of a sudden, winter comes back and says, it's not your time yet. Well, as somebody who loves gardening and who really is excited to get out here in the spring, I want to make sure that you're being cautious, or at least a little bit cautious, and that you know your last frost date or your approximate last frost date. For us here in Zone 5, Wisconsin, it's usually around the beginning to middle part of May. And we want to keep that in mind because something like what happened here last week can happen, where it's been 40, 45 degrees outside Fahrenheit, and then all of a sudden we get over a foot of snow. Now, a lot of that is melting pretty quickly because the temperature right now is about 38 degrees and it's going to get up to about 44 degrees Fahrenheit today. But still, if I were to bring out some of my plants too early, well, things aren't going to work that well. Now, all that being said, there are pieces of preparation that we're going to be putting in place here over the next couple of days as the temperatures look consistently to be in the 40s and 50s, and hopefully this white stuff is behind us. And the garlic that I have planted in this bed behind me, hopefully it's still doing its work underneath all of this hay that I've got in here. And as everything finally thaws out, we should start to see some development there, and we can finally get outside and get some of the preparations going for what we need to do for our spring garden. By the way, for those of you local to Wisconsin, I saw this really cool sign online about the 11 seasons of Wisconsin. And this year in particular, it really spoke to me on a different level. I'm sure many of you experienced some of these same different seasons and expectations. But all that being said, we are still doing a ton of preparation indoors for the spring season. And when I need that garden therapy, when I need that relaxation from gardening, I'm still able to get in there and get some work done. So today, I just want to show you a little bit of what we have still growing inside and give a little checkup on some of our seedlings. Well, you gotta love the sound of that water melting, coming right down that downspout. That's the sound of spring to me. I'm gonna show you what we have in our raised bed here. I've got some harvesting to do today. Some greens that have been really developing nicely. I've got a couple other things I wanna harvest. And again, as I said, I wanna show you some of our seedlings. Our onions in particular are doing really well right now. And I can't wait to get those outside. You know, there are a couple other things that we're gonna plant outside in April that can handle the cold or potential cold, and we'll get to that in a later video. Let's go ahead and take a look at what I'm harvesting right now. Well, I never came through and actually thinned out my kohlrabi, but they still developed just fine. I've got a couple on the smaller side, but I'm gonna harvest one of them right now. Take a look at this beauty. That's a lovely looking kohlrabi right there. I'd say it's about 2 inches, maybe a little bit over 2 inches in diameter, but this will be nice and soft. I haven't waited too long for this. You can see the root structure here on this one. Now, I didn't thin these out, so you can see what happens when you don't thin them out. You just do a multi-planting here. These two don't have as much room to grow, but this one off to the side did. So I'm gonna try to keep these in ground and just separate out the biggest one to allow the smaller ones to keep growing. There we go. That's another one about the same size as our first one. And I'll get our mix level back out here. I'm not gonna move them around and disturb them too much. And as I come back in here, you see a couple more. And I've got, this one is just about the right size, but I'm gonna let it go a little bit more. So we're just gonna keep it at those two today. And then we're gonna get some of this amazing kale. I'm actually gonna have to come around to the back to harvest this kale, but as I get in here, I talk more and more about kale. This is, as you can see, this got away from the light down here and was touching the ground. Just gonna pull that little bit off. The rest of this is just fine. You know what, sometimes I think it may seem like I'm making excuses for kale, like just trying to convince people to try it, as though there aren't that many people who like it. Well, I don't really know how many people love kale. And I don't mean to make excuses for it. It's just I think it's such a valuable vegetable to grow, indoors or outdoors. It doesn't really matter. The way I'm harvesting this one, I'm just harvesting those lower leaves. If you remember with kale, the new growth is going to come right out of the center here. And there's a whole bunch of new growth coming in here. Let me show you what it looks like. Right down in here is all that brand new growth coming right out of the top center. And you can see how thick and how sturdy the stalk is getting here as this plant continues to mature. I mean, this one kale plant is producing plenty of greens for us. Again, I'm just going to keep harvesting off of it as long as we possibly can. Now, once I've got that out of there, you can actually see some of what we have left in here. Here is our ginger, a couple of the gingers that we planted right in here. And I can tell you that this ginger is actually not doing as well as the ginger that we separated out. It's been in indirect light in containers. This one in particular this is the third stalk that's coming off of here, third stem. But you can see the amount of growth here. That's got to be 3 feet of growth here. And I can't wait to see what's going on underneath here, but we're going to save that for later for sure. And I think you can also see a couple things that look dead in here, and those are our potatoes that we planted in here that have died back completely. That's what that death is. That means I got to harvest those, but I'm not going to quite do that yet, not in this video. And of course, we've still got plenty of beet greens that we can harvest here in our green stalk. Look at these nice, healthy greens. You know, you can try to come in here and see, it's kind of dark, but you can see the foundation of a nice beet underneath here as well. Let me move this out of the way. You see it right there? So there are some beets growing in here too. Of course, you can grow the beets, but again, we've been mostly growing these for the greens, even though there is some nice development underneath. You know, garden therapy can take many forms, but seeing the success of the beginnings of our seedlings is another way that we're enjoying that therapy. Seeing things grow, seeing success, that is a great form and a great way of enjoying the experience of gardening. Let me show you what our onions are looking like right now. I'd say these are looking nice and healthy right now. I've got 3 or 4 per square in here, and I actually have some more that aren't quite as far along as this because we do want to have more of our onions to go out here in a pretty short time. But they're doing really well overall, especially our Ailsa Craig onion from Baker Creek Seeds. That's been performing really nicely. And our peppers are coming along really nicely as well. I've actually got quite a few pepper plants that are started. I've got some more, again, that are a little bit later coming along. But look at how beautiful and green and bright these are. You know, it's tough when we've got a video like this. I don't want to show every single thing we have going on. Here's some of our basil coming in. But I do want to give you an idea of what we've got started in here, so you can see the work we're putting in is starting to pay off as well. There is much, much more going on indoors in preparation for the spring. And I don't mean the false spring. I don't mean those fake springs out there. I mean the one where we can finally get out there and start working again in the soil. I can't wait for that time. I can't wait for the temperatures to consistently warm up. You see my sweet potatoes here off to the sides? Those are coming along really nicely. All of these things developing now are providing that potential for the spring. And so I have to tell you how excited I am, even though we've experienced a couple of false springs, even though I'd really like to get that outdoor garden therapy, there's plenty going on indoors to keep you going and to keep you busy. If you're starting your seeds now, if you're growing indoors in preparation for the spring, let us know what you've got going on in the comments below. Let us know what your experience is at this point, wherever you are. Again, we're here in Zone 5, Wisconsin, so I can tell you what our experience is like, but we'd love to hear from those other growing zones. I know some of you in the higher growing zones are probably at a point now where your potatoes are in full swing. There's probably a lot going on that is different than us, so we'd love to hear about it in the comments. Folks, if you enjoyed today's video, if you are ready for some of that garden therapy, go ahead and leave us a comment. Remember to share and subscribe, and most importantly, remember, when you're with us, you are good to grow.